When I started meditating 12 years ago or so, a lot of this inner self-esteem stuff changed because it was that searching inside of yourself, and I know, realizing you're all one, or you're loved, or you're connected, or whatever, or that all I need is my breath, whatever the thing is that it's given to you. And I felt amazingly more confident in myself in many aspects, right, environments, because of that.
We don't print stuff out. We don't write things down anymore like we used to. We have less keepsakes. And if you look at photos as a great example, I've got boxes and boxes of photos in the loft that you don't get them developed anymore. They just live on your iPhone and you actually do nothing with them, and eventually you delete them.
Afternoon, Nick. I see you sporting some fancy blue blocking glasses there.
I have, mate. I see you're sporting your own. There we are, both coming prepared with all this blue light blocking and looking after our screens. I said to you before, I often come to this part at the end of the day, because obviously it's at the end of the working day and my eyes are tired from being at a screen all day. And I don't want to say to our listeners, hey, how you doing, Harry? I'm feeling tired today. I want to, hey, I'm full of energy, and here we go. I haven't seen you for a couple of weeks. Thought the glasses might help. So yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. It's been a couple of weeks, hasn't it? How you been?
Has been a while. I mean, I'm doing okay. I was going to say with the glasses though, I'm finding it really hard now to get to sleep at a decent hour, because now we've got sunset is at 9:06 according to my watch, and sunrise at 4:47. So it doesn't actually get really dark until about 10 o'clock or so at night. And I'm noticing that in the winter, when I put my blue light blocking glasses on, I tend to put them on quite early, like 6 o'clock in the evening, because that's when I start to turn on lights, and then I find the lights too bright. So in the winter, by 9 o'clock, I'm kind of ready for bed. Here, 9 o'clock, I'm looking and I'm seeing the sunset out my window. And so I'm struggling. And actually what I'm trying to make a conscious effort now is I've got some darker shaded glasses, and I'm trying to put those on around 9 o'clock, because I'm not tired. And the last few nights, I think I've been going to bed, I don't remember whether it was Saturday night. I think Saturday night I went to bed at 2 a.m. I wasn't out or anything like that, but I wasn't sleepy. And then I started watching something around 9:30 at night. And I felt really off yesterday, which was Sunday. And I looked at my Oura ring and I was like, yeah, of course, because I went to bed at 2 a.m. and woke up at 8 or 9. So I had enough sleep actually, but because I went to bed much later, I'm finding it a real struggle. I do find being in the UK with the extremes of the light really problematic for me. I really do. Yes, anyway, that was all about blue blockers. But I'm doing okay. But off air, you were talking about today as a first, one of many firsts that you're going to have this year.
Yeah.
But tell the audience about what the first thing is.
First, well, I think you and I have created a bit of an identity for this show where we seem to, due to things outside of our control and not things obviously we'd ever necessarily predicted when we started chatting together, but we've lost my dog of 17 years and both our parents. And you lost your dad on Christmas Eve, lost my dad in March. And today is the first time it's my dad's birthday today, but he's not here. And that's been very strange and actually very emotional. I think I've been handling it really well, but I'll be honest, I came down this morning. I think we had some music playing in the background on Spotify in the kitchen, and it was that emotional music that gets the whole emotional juices flowing. I just had a good old cry this morning, a bit of a breakdown for tears. I don't know if I've been holding it in or just because it was the day or whatever, but yeah, it was an emotional start to the day. So I basically just got out and went for a run. I didn't sleep particularly well either, just because I think I knew this day was kind of coming around, so it was in my psyche. And yeah, it's just a bit odd. It's a bit odd. I'm gonna call my mum after this and see how she's getting on. But yeah, and I remember Kirsten, who's a listener to this show, and she said, you know what, it's when you deal with the first Christmas without the first birthday.
Yeah, I remember she sent us a nice message, and
she did,
and she was talking about how unfortunately, like, says the second year is harder than the first year, because the first year it is that kind of momentum, it is that adrenaline, it is that shock, it is get through the first Christmas, get through the first Easter, get through the first birthday, your first birthday, their first birthday. And so there's all of that. So yeah, I mean, we've only had Easter, I think. I mean, obviously my sister, both my sisters actually have had their birthdays without dad, but I don't think we really talked about it too much. I mean, my younger sister, we were together in Brighton, so I remember that was fresh, because that's literally 2 weeks afterwards, because it was her birthday's on the 8th of January, so it's literally 2 weeks. So that was really hard. I think my dad's birthday's in September, so But what I am finding, I had a like I'm welling up and crying whenever there's something on TV about something to do with a dad or loss of a dad, like you know, and it will just be maybe for like a few minutes, and I'll just but I'm that really still gets me. And as I said before, off air, like a coaching client of mine told me today that he's lost his mum to stage 4 bowel cancer. 3 weeks from finding out to it ending and stuff. And I think although you said, oh well, audience listeners might be thinking, oh, our show's all about death and this, that, and other. But really, obviously, our show is about mindset and overcoming challenges and resilience and health and well-being, and how do we become better, more resilient people. And there's there are going to be challenging. There are lots of challenging times in life, right? Loss of a loved one is one. Loss of a job. Maybe becoming homeless. So there's always going to be challenges, and so there's no point shying away from that. And it's not about you. I think what was I listening to some Instagram post where it was talking about 10 things I wish I'd known, or that it took me till I was 40 years old to learn. And it was one of the ones was that there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be crappy times, and so actually it's all about how you just operate in amongst all of that anyway, because there's no point, because I often think this, I think when I sort this out and I sort this out and sort this out, then I can be, enjoy and relax. And the reality is it's you're on like a spectrum, like a wave. And sometimes you're really got loads of challenges and other times it's slightly less, but there's never really a point where there's zero.
No. Yeah, it's always ebbs and flows, or the pendulum. I think we've talked about before. I think there's we talked a little bit about in some of our earlier episodes, subconscious mind versus the conscious mind, and I think for me, probably 90% of what we deal with every day is in the subconscious, because we can't think about everything all the time, or our heads would explode if we were able to memorize and remember everything that's going on in our lives, everything we've eaten, remember to breathe, all those things. So it goes into our subconscious, and I think this day has kind of crept up on me. So I've been feeling fine. We thought about it, and it's all been sort of in the subconscious. And then a little trigger in the morning suddenly comes into my awareness, comes into my conscious mind, and kind of let it out this morning. So yeah, I think it took me a little bit by surprise, but at the same time, it's been a pretty good day. Otherwise, I've been productive. I've called this to move the subject on slightly, the first day of my 5-week to fitness plan, because I'm so out of shape for Ironman coming up because of everything that's gone on, that I need to either sort of get into it or not bother. And so today I was up early, and I've managed to get a cycle in and a run in today, and I've got 5 weeks now to get myself in shape. So that's definitely in my conscious mind at the moment, trying to, healthy mind, healthy body, and all that. So I think
Right, yeah. Where's the sign, man, that you're doing?
I'm doing Swansea in July. 14, I think it's the 14th of July, and then I've got the full Denmark, Copenhagen in August. And I'm so out of shape, Harry, compared to how I'd usually approach these races. So
yeah, I mean, you're out. First, a couple of things. You're out of shape is never going to be that bad, I don't think. But secondly, with your mindset, you're going to be able to turn it around very easily.
I hope so. I've got 5 weeks. 5 weeks should give me something to focus on. And actually, it's a good distraction. I think I've been very aware of my distractions. I don't know if you've been the same post my dad passing. I think I definitely have been distracting myself. I went back to see my mum yesterday in Salisbury with all my family, which was great. So my brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces, and I've been feeling fine, but it's because as soon as you get into that house, you have that instant wave of, you're surrounded by that feeling, the spirit of, or whatever, just a whole presence of pictures and love for my dad being around. And it's like, wow, God, when I'm working like today, you can, today probably be an exception to the rule, but you can often almost forget that he's gone, because he could easily just be in Salisbury with my mum. So when you go home, you kind of, as you'll know when you've been to see your mum, right, you're suddenly met with this realization that that's not the case. And then you kind of think, I'm back to the old song, back to reality. It comes back in, okay, still.
That my mum's Saturday. So on Saturday, I mean, to be honest, she's only 10 minutes away from me. She's been very busy anyway. She was in Brighton last week with one of the granddaughters to visit the other granddaughter, and they had an amazing time there. Like the two 10-year-olds, so they got to hang out. They went to Brighton Pier and they spent 7 hours on all the rides on Brighton Pier. And I think like our sort of cousin who works on the Brighton Pier managed to get them free tickets for the rides or something like that. But anyway, she's been pulled from pillar to post anyway, looking after grandchildren. So whenever she's around here, I try and do things for her because, whether it's the food or whatever else. But on Saturday, I went around there to try and make a start on the loft. Now, we're hopefully going to sell the house this summer. We are waiting for an exchange. You never know what's going to happen though, but that should be in about 2 weeks' time. So fingers crossed. So we can't sell anything big until it exchanges, because otherwise the house looks empty. But things like the loft, the garage, all of those kind of spaces actually need clearing anyway. And so I was up there in the loft, and it's really interesting because there was some suitcases which I'm sure we could sell to some retro store or whatever it is in Shoreditch. I just don't have the energy. But they're from like the 60s. They had like the dress of where they lived written on the front. I mean, they're classic little pictures, like suitcases. But I was clearing a bit of the loft. I made a small dent, maybe like 10% into it. But it's interesting because you have all these memories and this nostalgia. And I didn't go through my dad's stuff there, but what I did go through actually, which was quite interesting, and I didn't know I'd kept them all, but I had all these cards, birthday cards, Christmas cards. Actually, our mutual friend, Joe Hines. So there's a couple from him. I actually took a couple of photos and sent them to him on WhatsApp. There was one that he'd basically made with an A4 piece of paper and folded it. And there was a picture of me playing basketball and saying, "Joe, pass me the ball," or something like that. It was quite funny. So I've kept all these, and I had all these cards as well from this girl that I was actually my first proper girlfriend, I guess. But I was in my 20s, and we were together for like just over 2 years, I think. But I had all the cards from her, like I think it was a 6-month anniversary card, a Valentine's Day card, a birthday card, including this really massive, big, cheesy birthday card that she sent me one of the birthdays. And I kept them all. My mum was like, "Oh, I think you should, get rid of them or something like that." And I'm like, actually, no, it's not that I'm holding on to those things because I'm pining after her or anything like that, or haven't got over that. I mean, we broke up now 20 years ago, I guess it was almost. It was more about two things, really. One, I'm not sure if we talked about it on the show before or not, but I think I had these beliefs growing up when I was younger that, I wouldn't be in a relationship or this, that, and the other. And then by having that girl as my girlfriend for like that 2-year period, it broke that belief, if you like, of like, oh, I'm not going to be boyfriend material. So part of it is that to remind myself, especially with the messages, she wrote really nice messages. And it was reminding myself about who I am and how I'm perceived by a partner. And so that's one of the reasons I kept it. And the other reason I thought, and hopefully this doesn't happen to me in the future, but let's say, you get Alzheimer's or dementia, it's actually holding on to these memories and looking at those things again that might trigger things or might keep you, like, even you only look at this stuff when you move house, right? Yeah. You never look at it unless you move in house. You keep it all the same. And then it's like every 15 years or so, you trundle into it and you're like, and I think it's just nice to kind of keep the memory active more so than, I can't let go of a person. I've kept, I like to keep it. It's sentimental as well.
There's a couple of things in there you might find interesting. One is, and if I don't know if they listen to this or not, a couple of friends have helped me move house a couple of times. I've got a full-size drum kit. I played drums all my life, and but I haven't got it out of the attic for a long time. And we live in a 3-story house. We moved from a 3-story house. And my friend Steve said, if I have to move this drum kit one more time, like he's moved it 3 times across 3 different moves. It's never been played. And he has to carry this huge thing up into the loft. So that was something that came into mind. But that's an aside. What I thought was interesting is I'm the same as you. And it's a little bit embarrassing. Like I'd be horrified, I think, if my wife started looking through these shoe boxes I've got. I've got shoe boxes of every single letter, card, and love letter. But I've got loads of these things, right, that I've ever had Valentine's cards since I was, primary school. And I've got a terrible memory. So it's exactly that. When sometimes when you move house, you do open these things up, you have a little read, and it reminds you of just good memories. Really, you're not, as you say, you're not pining after these people. I can't even remember who some of the people are that I've written in my Levers book and stuff, but I've got them there. And there's one thing I'll always remember, which just made me chuckle. I had a science teacher called Mr. Holland. I'm sure he doesn't listen to this. I don't know what he's doing, where he is in the world. He was quite a young teacher, though. He was called Bill Holland. And do you remember when I think it was Alien 1 or Alien 2, and you had the robot who could do if anyone's watching, you do the compass between the hands, like between the fingers, and do it like at super speed. I think it was an alien that happened, and they were doing it, and it was super fast. Well, I had a compass with about an inch point on, and I decided to do that with his hand, and I ended up stabbing him with it. Obviously, not because if I say what he said to me in the book, it will sound worse than it was. But ultimately, was doing the alien thing and caught him in the hand and got in a bit of trouble for that. He wrote in my leaving book, and I remember this, which my memory is terrible, was saying, Nick, thank you for ruining all of the science lessons you ever partook in. Thank you for stabbing with a compass. Thank you for making my life a misery. Go away and never come back. Bill Holland. That's what my teacher wrote in my leaving book at GCSE. That's absolute genius.
That's great.
So I remember
that's
that.
Great.
That's never left.
I love. Speaking of leaving at GCSE, the other thing I found in the loft was I don't know if you did this, but I don't know if students still do this, but we had uniforms, and on the last day of school, you write
all
each
over
other's
the
uniforms.
Yeah.
So I had the one from primary school and the one from secondary school. The other thing I also found in the loft, which I posted on Instagram, so if anyone looked at my Instagram yesterday, 2nd of June, I posted two pictures of me in my uniforms, of my scout uniform and then my scout leader uniform, which still fit. The trousers, I'll admit, were a little bit tight around the waist and they were tight around the thighs, which they were always quite tight anyway. I really didn't like them. But the shirts fit because they were always probably quite baggy on me. But I was like, I had not worn those in 30 years. I've kept them all as well because I may end up needing them for a fancy dress some point. And also, the Scout movement was a massive part of my identity.
Yeah. Well, let's stay in the loft for a minute. There's a couple of things here. So one is very kindly. I don't know whether she discovered it through Facebook or through listening to the show or not. Because we've been talking about my dad's cancer situation before he passed for some time for my first episode. Well, it's episode 40, 41 now. And an ex-girlfriend called Sam just sent me through the post randomly loads of photos that when she came on holiday with me and my dad many years ago, before I met my wife, and I was at uni, she had loads of pictures of my family, and she knew because she's lost her dad to cancer, that they'd become really valuable. So that was a really nice thing to come through the post, and I put them. But I kept those pictures of my dad out, but the other pictures of me and her from those days, of course, haven't necessarily shared with my wife and everyone else. I've hidden those back up in the loft with everything else. Exactly. Well, I mean, I probably have got to the point now. Married, 2 kids, love my wife to bits. I should probably get rid of some of that stuff. But I kind of think it's not doing any harm. It's sat in the loft. No one's, it's just.
I was thinking this when I was looking at my shoebox, and I was thinking, I've got this for those reasons I've just explained. But then I was thinking, if I was married and I had, and I'd been married for 10 years, but then or 20 years, and my wife still had her boyfriend before me.
It'd feel a bit odd, wouldn't it?
Letters. I would feel odd.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I would. And so I get it, but then at the same time, I'm like, but there isn't anything there. But it's more about, I don't know, it's more about who I am and who I was and who I've become. And yes, the memory part as well. But like I was saying to my mum, it's like, I think she was saying in one of the ex-girlfriend was saying in one of the things, I sometimes catch myself staring at you and I can't believe how lucky I am to have you as my boyfriend and how frigging hot you are and all that. And I'm like, you know what? Sometimes you need to hear that. And actually this goes on to another thing that is a recommendation I often give to clients. And I started doing years ago. I don't know if you do this or not, but both in my email and in my physical drawer, I have a positive feedback folder. So anything I'm getting, so if I got I remember I got a card once from a client because she had an eating issue where I don't think she could have certain foods touch on the plate or something like that. Anyway, she was getting married in a couple of months' time, and it was really going to impact the whole marriage and the wedding and everything else. And I did some jiggery pokery with mindset stuff and a few other things, and basically resolved. And so she wrote me a really nice card. And I think that's maybe when I started doing it. And so I had that card and a few other cards. And anything I get, I have an email inbox. And I do recommend listeners do this. Whether it was from your parent that's saying good job, or your boss saying good job, or I sometimes had a random, I might have got a random email back in the day when I was writing for Toastmaster magazine, which was the official magazine of the Toastmasters organization. And I kept that because I think they were saying, oh, this inspired me to do my first 10K by reading about your 3 Peaks challenge, like the UK 3 Peaks challenge. And so now I've got all these emails, and sometimes I haven't looked at it for months actually, or years, but I might go in there, especially if I'm feeling a bit doubtful. And this is especially applicable for anyone listening who may be starting out on the path and you're not getting the traction that you want, and you feel, what's the point, and is it worth it, and should I go back to my corporate job, and should I do this? I sometimes just go through that and go, actually, this is who I am as well.
Yeah.
Right? I've helped this person, I've impacted this life, and that's another reason why I keep.
It brings something else into play. Well, a couple of things. One is we often, people give up. We overpredict what we can achieve in 1 year and massively underpredict what we can achieve in 10. I'm sure when you started your journey, and you can share it in a moment if you want to, but this is your first year into the world of health and vitality when you quit your London city job to go and follow your dream. Like the first year must have been tough, but you look back 10 years on, you've published several books, you're living in the space, you're fully comfortable in your surroundings, you know what you're doing. And it's hard to imagine where you'd be 10 years on. I remember, before my first child, now I've got a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old, but before my first child, the idea of even having kids, it was crazy. And yet we overpredict and often underpredict, overpredict in the short term, underpredict in the long term. But going back to the loft element, I've been inspired by Stacey Solomon of all people. I don't know if you know who she is. I saw it for the first time. I've never seen it before. I end up going to bed late watching it. Well, yeah, you know what? It's just I've decided that I can imagine there would be where they just clear things down. So I've bought myself a label maker, and I'm going to go up to. There you go. I'm going to buy some plastic boxes, and rather than, as I've always done before, just do drawer by drawer, cupboard by cupboard. Everything's coming out, but I'm going to do it room by room, and we're going to end up in the loft last. And we're just going to take everything out of the kitchen, put it on the table, and just then sort and put stuff back and have a bit of a declutter. It is a bit of distraction as well. It keeps me busy and just keeps things going on. But we've got that going on the lofts. It's funny because I've been really weirdly excited about this project coming up, and it may mean some of these. I'm doing it with Lucy. Some of these boxes of crap that I've kept for years and years may actually have to go, because you're absolutely right. If Lucy sees it, it's just, I'd feel awkward if it was the other way around, but it's going to be hard for me to let go.
I don't think those things have to go. I don't think those things have to go.
I think the ex-girlfriend stuff from university, but I've literally got one girl was used to send me teddies and stuff through the post because it was long distance, and I've still got all that stuff with notes stuck to them.
You say that stuff. I've got in that box that I opened up. Do you remember there were these things called trolls?
Yeah, I do remember trolls.
Like
yeah,
and had the weird
hair.
So I opened that up and I saw the troll and I was like, and basically it was a girlfriend, not my first girlfriend, but a girlfriend I had, I think when I was like 12, who was from Denmark. So I told you I'm in the Scouts, right? So I've been in the Scout movement from when I was 6 to 21 years old, and our Scout group had this relationship, which still goes on now, with speaking about Denmark, a Danish Scout group from Odense, right? And it's been going on since the 60s. So every 4 years we go to Denmark, and every 4 years they come to the UK. So every 2 years we see them effectively. And so I think it was 1991. 1991. I think we were in the Peak District, or 1990. And we were in the Peak District. And so Rekka Madsen was her name. And I remember because she always used to say Piccadilly instead of Piccadilly. And so anyway, we got together. She was kind of one of the two super hot ones for that age group anyway at the camp. And so we got together during the camp. And I think one of the presents she gave me was this troll. And I think he's lost his sign now, but I think he said something like "Friends Forever" or something like that. And I remember every time
that's not what you want, mate. That's not the message you want from that girl. No, friends forever. That's friend zoned. Friend zoned as teenagers.
No, well, I certainly wasn't friend zoned, but every few years I see it, and I always think, should I just get rid of it because it's not serving any purpose? But I'm like, no, because actually it reminds me of a girlfriend I had when I was 12. And actually, incidentally, I then went there when I was 17. We'd had a bit of a break in terms of going to visit the Danish, and I hadn't seen her. She'd left the guides by then, but she turned up to one or two evenings that we went out, and it was good actually. I think I've got a photo somewhere that I posted online of her. But I've not seen her since 1995, of course. But I think it was just nice to have these things, and so I think like a little shoebox with the odd little thing is fine. It's not like you're looking at it all the time and finding
No.
it. It's just it's part of your history, and that's why it's so hard for my mom to let go of things, because I'm looking at this weird thing that is some sort of an ashtray or something like that. I'm like, this is disgusting. I've always hated it. Let's get rid of it. She's like, I made that in pottery class when I was pregnant with your sister. Like, so it's like, so I'm like, okay, fine. Because it's those memories, right?
There's a few things. I mean, the one thing I couldn't get rid of is my yellow leaving book, which is where that Bill Holland comment is in, and also, and I've actually utilized this for my kids, my daughter. But she'll kill me for exposing this, but talking about whether what do you do when you like someone or you don't like someone or you want to tell someone, and this is a while ago, to be fair. It's probably a couple of years ago when she was 10 or 11. And I said, you never know. And the reason you never know is in my leaving book, I had a crush on various different girls at different times. But when you've got nothing, you're going to leave and you're not going to see these people again necessarily. And suddenly people write in their messages, and one of the girls in there that I always quite liked wrote in there, I always had a crush on you and I never knew. And I was like, no, I wish I'd known. Not that it would have meant anything, but you're thinking, do you think I never made the move, never had the confidence? I always thought she wasn't keen, but she wrote it in the book. I know exactly what it is. I won't expose her on here. Maybe I'll get the yellow book down and talk about it. But I still get a good feeling about that now. And I would have been 14, 15, 15 then.
When I looked at that leaving shirt, on Saturday from fifth form or whatever, year 11, I remember distinctly in the top left breast area of the shirt. Again, there was this girl that I liked, and she, I mean, I liked her on and off for like years, and I never made the move. And it was one of the things I'm sure I've talked about before about regret and whatever else. But she had written just like friendly kind of speak, like "Love you, Harry" or something like that, right? And she wrote her name, which I won't give it away. And I looked on the weekend, and that's frigging faded off. And I'm like, that was definitely there. I was definitely there because I remember writing in pen her surname as well. So I remember it was so and so, so and so. And I was gutted even on the weekend, even though it's been like, I don't know, 10 years since I've seen her, 20, 30 years since that incident. But she was one of the people that I really liked for a long time. And she liked me at one point when we were on French exchange, and I never knew about, but she had a boyfriend, and so nothing happened. And then it was one of those big regrets where nothing ever happened with us, and we did kind of like each other. And so I really resonate with that, where it's that last day and you've got nothing to lose. But yeah, when it was disappeared on me, I suddenly was like, oh, I think that's a part of my history that's disappeared as well.
But it's nice, isn't it, as well, if you think about it from a mindset perspective, and you and I obviously keep these things for similar reasons, but it also reminds you of your own evolution, the way you thought then and the way we think now, and the way that our thought processes have evolved, the people that we've become. If you look at your leaving books, you can kind of get a sense of where you may have gone, but you're not fully formed at that age. Your mind, you don't really understand the world. You've got lots to learn, experience, mature. The way your thought process are going to get challenged. And I think it's quite interesting just looking back, because the way that I thought then, I felt I was absolutely invincible as a 15-year-old. I was incredibly, I would say, confident. I'm sure others would say cocky. He was getting in trouble at school for cheeky stuff, not bad stuff. But yeah, I felt absolutely invincible. Whatever I could do, I put my mind to it, I can go and do it. And obviously not on everything, because I never asked that girl out in the leaving, but for most things, I felt pretty confident. And I think also, like, even now when I'm looking at the Stacey Solomon project, I have an awareness now that I also want to do it because it's a distraction. I don't want to look at the cause of ourselves. And if you look at things like self-esteem from a mindset perspective, often we do things to distract ourselves with our environment because we don't want to look inward. We want to look at what the cause is. So in this instance, I'm going to buy some boxes, spend some money, give me that little mini high, going to go up to the loft and all the other places, start going through sorting, distract myself from the other bits. But, cleansing the mind, soul, house.
Yeah, body, I don't think it is a distraction necessarily. And I actually do think it is about looking inwards, right? So even though, firstly, a couple of things I want to say, right, is that, decluttering the environment, or your outward world is a reflection of your inner world anyway. And so it isn't about distraction, I don't think, because actually I didn't get much done on Saturday because I was looking inward a lot. Because when I was clearing those boxes, and when I opened that box of my ex-girlfriends and everything else, I was actually doing a lot of self-reflection, because I was also asking myself, why am I keeping this?
Well, that's what I mean by the evolution piece. It gives you a chance to think differently.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I mean, and to see how you're perceived by others with the Leaving book was quite interesting. And actually, it reminds me, this behind me, where is it? This thing here, viewers might be able to see it, but this jar here is actually, it says Sunday School Yoga. So I did a yoga teacher training thing about, 6 years ago, after my original teacher training. And one of the activities we had to do was take some notes, and then you would write about a person, what you so for example, for Nick, I'd say dedicated, sporty, A-type, achiever, father, business owner, whatever. And then you stick them on that person, and then it'll be seen how you're perceived. And I've still got all of these now, and I haven't looked at them in years, so I don't know what people have written, but let me just pull one up.
Well, while you're pulling out them, because I think this makes sense. I made a note, and I forgot to mention it when you were talking about the things that you kept, and this is kind of links to that, so you can read them out in a sec. But what's beautiful about times past that I think we miss in future, we always think technology is evolving everything that we do, and it's great because we can do more things quicker, we can store more, we can do all that stuff. But we don't print stuff out. We don't write things down anymore like we used to. We have less keepsakes. And if you look at photos, as a great example, I've got boxes and boxes of photos in the loft that you don't get them developed anymore. They just live on your iPhone, and you actually do nothing with them. And eventually you delete them and you run them down. In times gone by, you'd be more selective about the pictures you took, and you'd be way more proactive in getting them developed and sharing them and keeping these keepsakes, like the letters you've got. So it's interesting. You said, do you keep these testimonials? I've got testimonials and letters I received up until around about 2004, 2005. I know we had email before then, but at that point, it just didn't make sense anymore because we started getting testimonials online as a Google review or something else. And I just stopped keeping it. So I don't have that stuff anymore. And I think that's a real shame, because the nostalgic value it gives you when you go back, and that feeling it's going to give you by looking
at I've got emails
amazing
from 1996 that friends of mine sent to me when we left school, and I had them printed. I think I've got rid of them now, maybe, but I had them printed and had them for over 20 years. And I've got in the cupboard over there all my albums. What I have done, though, for those listening, because I wasn't printing out for many years, I was a little bit in the digital age, but now what I do is there's an app, I can't remember what it's called, Social Book, something like that. I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. But you effectively give them access to your timeline or your Instagram thing, and then you can pick and choose what you want. But I now get books printed, and it becomes like a journal. So it will print the writing that I've written if I choose to, the albums, the pictures I've posted. It costs a fair bit of money, actually, and I do it like every couple of years, and it costs me a few £100. But I've got now physical copies of all pictures and posts that I've written since I started on Facebook. So I'm very big on. And this might be why I've got a good memory, because I don't know if it's because I've got a good memory or because I often have this memories about. But actually, I've just picked out a couple of comments, which I think you might find quite interesting, or the listeners might find quite interesting. And it's, again, how I'm perceived. So, Harry, you're a font of knowledge, which I love because I'm also a bit of a geek. Have loved all the conversations and your direct, but kind viewpoints. Much love. And you don't know who it's from. Harry, thanks for all the brilliant chats about all things mind and body. A man of so much knowledge. Also for bringing spinal rolls into my practice life. Your honesty about how you digest chocolate. There we go. But it was, because I would probably say that I have flatulence maybe if I eat too much chocolate.
If I'd emailed it to you, though, I bet you wouldn't have a copy of it in quite the same way. It certainly wouldn't be in a little jar behind you, and that's the difference.
No, and also when I see it, it's a visual anchor. So I've often thought about removing this, because I'm like, I don't look at it, but it's not about looking at it. It's about having those visual anchors, because that's how we learn. That's how we remember things. And this is why my mum doesn't want to get rid of so many things. Because it's not about photos. It's about all the other objects. It's all the other things. So I think it's important to keep these things. Is the challenge for me, I think, is how much do you look back and how much do you look forward? And I try and equate it like driving a car, is that, you need to use your wing mirrors and your rear view mirror, right? But you don't want to be spending all your time looking in those mirrors. Otherwise you won't see where you're going. And so it's a balance to be had. I feel like I look back a bit too much. I think you're very much a forward-looking person, and you're very much more in the moment, present person. I think I've got a ridiculous memory. I think I was meeting up with someone the other day who I hadn't seen for a long time. I can't even remember where we were now, but I was coming up with these things of our conversation that we'd had, and I'd only met this person like once or twice through a friend of a friend. And I was, that was so it was my brother-in-law's best mate and his wife, and I was talking to them about things and talking to her, and I've only met her maybe once, twice. Probably last time was 10 years ago, and I was coming up with all this stuff and that I'd remembered from my interaction with her. So in a way, it's a good thing. People always praise me for my memory, but on the flip side, I think, is it that I remember these things because I spend so much time looking back?
Let me ask you a question, and I'd be interested to get your response. I don't know how you're going to perceive this. I can probably have a prediction, but something's come to mind. So I said to you that, and I understand what you said, potentially for me, I feel like it is a distraction, but I totally understand, I think you said the outside view is a reflection of the inside. And I get the whole decluttering your mind anyway is a good thing for mind, health, and well-being. So there are some positive aspects with the plan thing I have planned. But you're looking at these positive affirmations. Now, the positive affirmations have been given to you. Do they? I'm just thinking what we talked about subconscious. I'm trying to articulate my thoughts here. But when a lot of people read self-help books. We know self-help books now are massive at the moment. Everyone wants to read, they want to feel better about their self-esteem, that they've got issues, whatever it might be. And they think, I'll read this book to make myself feel better about myself. And I get it, we need to learn, right? And learning isn't always solving. And when you have these positive affirmations behind you and these things you look at, they remind you that you are these things, that you have this fountain of knowledge, that you give people good feelings, that you help people. It's all great stuff. But do they get to the cause? Do they really impact the experience of you, or are they a temporary measure? I.e., from a conscious point of view, the 10% that we're aware of, it makes you feel better. Okay, I'm trying to word this right. I'm sorry if I'm losing listeners here. I understand what I'm trying to say. So for the 10% of your conscious mind, it's good in the short term because it makes you go, you know what, I am a good person. And yes, I did help that person. That makes me feel good about myself. But you're using someone else's affirmation to feel good about yourself rather than yourself to feel good about yourself. So you're not really dealing with the experience of you. But in doing so, the 90% of I'm picking up random stats, and not necessarily this ratio, but to say the 90% of that lives in your subconscious, is that also when you read those things subconsciously, you're actually reminding yourself that you don't feel good enough because you need those things to remind yourself, because you need those anchors. And actually by reading them, you're actually feeding the subconscious negative side of you and the experience of you. And I just, because self-help books are great, but they don't necessarily solve a problem. And I know you weren't talking about self-help groups, but you were talking about anchors and affirmations. It just made me think, well, sometimes we look for things and they make us feel good in the short term, but actually they feed a bigger monster inside. I want to get your view.
Basically, just in case the listeners have lost that, so what I'm understanding by that is you're saying by looking at these things which are effectively giving you praise and it helping build you up, is it then by doing that reminding you that you needed that building up in the first place and actually
because you're not good enough? Yeah.
And that's a really interesting point, and not one I've necessarily thought about. I have thought about it, and I think yes is the answer. But here's the thing, because you talked about a second ago, you're using these things to build you up, and you should be building up yourself. The reality is, a lot of time, people who maybe don't have high self-esteem or high self-worth, that's learned, right? If you think about a baby has got perfect confidence, self-esteem, whatever. Yeah. They can lose that quite quickly if they're not loved and not held, and they're in a terrible environment. But our environment matters, right? Massively, as we all know. And so putting that environment, if you've got that environment, and our environment could be our internal environment, there's that famous I don't know if you saw it, but there was this famous advert by some woman's product company. I can't remember, but the premise of the advert, they're in a cafe. I think we've talked about this. We've actually talked about it. Where they're overhearing conversations at the next table saying you're so ugly and you're fat and why would you go out like that? And actually, that's how a lot of people talk to themselves anyway, right? So we have this conversation going on, and I think I had it a while back, a lot more than I do now. Maybe I'm talking about 15 years ago, where I'm like, oh, who am I to do this, or I'm not good enough for this. And then, through some of the work I've done with NLP and self-talk and all that, that's changed. But part of that change did come about from activities like this, right? Like seeing how other people perceive you. And there's a phrase I remember hearing a coach tell me once, and I don't know if this is going to go over anyone's head, but I really resonated with it. And I think I've mentioned it to you before. But it's if you don't believe in yourself, then find someone that you believe in, who believes in you, and believe in them instead, right? Because obviously they're seeing something in you and you respect them and believe in them. So actually you should be then seeing that in yourself. And that really resonated with me, because I don't think there were points, especially at that point in my life, where I had a lot of belief in myself, but other people, especially people close to me, tend to believe in me maybe in a way that I don't see. And I respect their position. And so actually I'm thinking, well, if they're seeing that in me, that's probably within me.
But there's still a question as to why do I not see it necessarily in myself. The reason I bring it up, and I won't share. I don't want to share something that it's not for me to share. It's for you. But you and I have had conversations at your place about some of we all have insecurities. That doesn't matter how much you work in self-help, whether you're Tim or Tony Robbins or anyone else, right? They'll have things that we're not always proud of, or things we regret, or things we feel we could do better, or be a better person, whatever. And I know there are things in yours where some of the things you talked about and some of the affirmations you're looking at, some of the things you've been seeking out in your box, directly link to some of the areas where you sometimes question. So again, I'm wondering if that is a good affirmation in the short term, but does it really adding to the experience of you? And you mentioned the environment piece, and I get it to a certain degree, of course, a reflection of our own environments. But a lot of people, and I have this in the world of recruitment, right? When I get that job, I'll be happier. When I get that job and earn that money, and I can move house and live there, then I'll be happier. When I'm able to get that extension or whatever it is, I'll be happier. And you may be happier in the short term, but there's a great quote, if you're talking about coaching quotes, which is, wherever you go, there you are. It doesn't matter. These are environmental things that feed us in the short term and give us temporary highs, but they don't actually impact the experience of ourselves, the experience of you. And I think that needs a deeper introspection to get to. And I just think a lot of people struggle with that because we're able to surround ourselves with noise that make us feel good in the short term, but secretly behind the scenes, when no one's looking, we sometimes feel a bit rotten.
I mean, it's a bit like, have you heard of Maxwell Maltz? He was, I think I have. I think his book is called Cybernetics or something like that.
No.
Something like that. But I think he might have been a plastic surgeon in the 60s. But what he was saying that, people getting all these plastic surgeries to make themselves feel better, but actually they weren't feeling better because they were changing their external environment without changing the internal environment. And so I think that's kind of what you're saying, is that, and it's true, but they both work in tandem. So like people that work in actors, actresses, whatever it might be, who are looking at the Instagram influencers, right? This is a big problem, right? Because we're getting a lot of our self-worth from outside adulation and likes and comments and all of that. And actually not having a lot of your worth is then determined by what other people perceive of you, which you can't control, which is the problem. I'm not saying, and I'm saying that and I agree, that's a problem, right? You need to do the inner work as well. But I think the inner work,
it's a question, not a challenge, by the way. It's something to ponder on.
No, I know. And I'm trying to articulate it in a way that, because I feel like maybe some of the listeners might be lost with the points that we're taking on this. But I feel like by having that external environment, we've got permeable skin. Just like when you put sun cream on, it goes through. You're getting that into your body in a way that will change the inner world as well, right? Because imagine if you're told your whole life you're useless, that's going to become your belief, right? That's going to become and you're going to think that's come from you when it hasn't. equally, if you've had parents that your whole life have said you can do anything, you put your mind to it, you can do anything, you'll probably likely develop that belief, right? You take those twins, put them in those different environments. And so that outside environment has created your inner environment.
But we
So
also know
it
the
makes
word
sense.
in belief in the middle is lie, right? And they're not always
Yeah,
true.
well, they're all lies followed by BS, as I say, right? Big stories that we tell ourselves. So, but what I'm saying is that, you know, seeing how other people perceive you, looking at the positive feedback, looking at that, we need these reminders because it can be hard. You do everything, you're doing everything, and you're not getting that kind of feedback. Like, for example, you've talked about, your business. I'm not going to go into business related stuff, but you're saying, okay, it's doing well, and you've used a certain metric to say that it's doing well. That objectively is an objective metric, but also it's a reflection of, I don't want to say like not popularity, but it's an outside, adulation metric in a way, right? It translates to, let's say, revenue or whatever it might be, but it's like your business doing well is a reflection of outside validation in a way. So I think, but if you were like working and working and working, you didn't have that as a metric, right? Well, you don't measure, you can't manage. I think it's more difficult. So I'm not sure. I guess your original point was by looking at those things about being all positive, is it not just highlighting the fact that you don't have that within you?
Yeah.
Yes, it does
was
to
the
some
point,
degree,
really.
because sometimes I look at that. Well, actually, I look at that, and actually, those two things highlight something that I'm trying to work away in a way, because I'm a bit of a thinker, right? As you know, and I maybe overthink things, and I think about a situation which doesn't warrant thinking about it to ruin it. And actually, ironically, sometimes I see that as a reflection of things I want to work on, right? I'm like full of knowledge of saying all this.
And explore, which is cool. I know that if you were coaching me or I was coaching you and we had that conversation, and we won't obviously do a coaching call here and now, I'd want to know why, particularly why those things are important and why you need it. Exactly. It would be a sensible question, a sensible avenue to go down, and why you need that affirmation in those particular areas. Because there are other areas of your life, it doesn't matter what I said to you, you already are so confident in that element of your life that you wouldn't need an affirmation for it. But there are other elements in your life where I know you and I know that you probably do it. Same for me. There's some things you could say to me and you could say, Nick, you're rubbish at that. But it'd fall on deaf ears because I have the inner confidence to support it. But there are triggers which you could also say something that would make me go, oh, I'm going to go for those affirmations. I'm going to go and speak to my wife or my dad. There you go, dropped it there. My mum, rather now, and say, I heard this thing, and I'd need that affirmation from them to say, no, because I probably question whether there's some truth in it. So that was all it was, really. I think sometimes.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting line of questioning. I was just trying to think of a metaphor for it, and I was thinking whether it's like I wear that like clothing. Like I know who I am, right, without my clothing on, right? But my clothing will, like right now I'm wearing just a dodgy t-shirt, or whatever, but I may be wearing a suit or a shirt, and it's something I might use, but I'm not. I don't think that I don't need the t-shirt.
You might not, but there'll be other people that
completely
really doll up and dress up specifically because they make them
exactly
want to be seen in a certain way because they're masking how actually unconfident and the insecurities they have. So,
that's social media all over.
Well, there you go. It absolutely is, and sometimes it compounds.
That's social media all over
the problem.
And I totally agree with you on that respect. I just feel like that. I think, and I think you're right that by looking at these things and going, oh, actually, it's reflecting. Maybe I don't feel that, and actually, I need this to help me that.
I think it's one really good positive of this stuff for me is it helps you identify potentially, not in all cases, but potentially where we do need to do some inner work and just go, actually, but I do need.
Well, this is exactly what I was going to say. Is that I feel like and we put it back to meditation, but I feel like when I started meditating 12 years ago or so, a lot of this inner self-esteem stuff changed because it was that searching inside of yourself and I know realizing you're all one or you're loved or you're connected or whatever, or that all I need is my breath, whatever the thing is that it's given to you. And I felt amazingly more confident in myself in many aspects, right, in environments because of that. So I don't feel like a lot of the time I need this stuff to kind of give me fuel, but it's kind of like trimming, right? If you like, it's not the fuel as such.
Yeah, I mean, the counter argument would be, because I said I don't necessarily, I'm not pushing necessarily my view on it, is we all have an ego. You can't get rid of an ego. You can dilute it, and you can, and it's sometimes it's just nice for the ego to hear a positive thing, right? And we're not always good at telling ourselves or convincing ourselves because of that subconscious, because of the bad wolf, the good wolf on each shoulder, right? Sometimes we listen to the bad wolf. Most humans have an instinct to be more negatively biased anyway. So we're negative bias on ourselves and how our outlooks on the world tend to be more security and safety over over the positive. So sometimes affirmations are just good for our ego. So I wasn't just
Yeah, no, and we also we grow up. The thing is, we grow up in an environment, whether the parent intends it or not, of a earning adulation kind of environment, because you're saying, if you tidy your room, then you'll get to go. It's basically like we're taught conditional love, even though our parents supposedly love us unconditionally. What an infant, I believe, learns is conditional love, because if I don't tidy my room, my parents will shout at me. Therefore, I'm not loved. Right? That's the meaning that you might create in that moment as a father.
And actually, take it further. Therefore, so, I'm going to die. Sometimes you take it that extreme. It's that survival.
Yeah, and so I think we learn this from a young age, that our popularity, for want of a better word, or our connection with other people is conditional based on whether we satisfy certain criteria and needs. So we learn that, and that's a problem to some degree, because you want to feel no matter who you are, and this is why people struggle with identity politics, or their sexuality or whatever, because it's like, if I'm not what other people expect, if I'm only going to be loved on condition of this. So I think it's really interesting. I think we've gone all around the houses with all this, but I'm not sure.
Some self-introspection though on why we're trying to aim for something like the new house or the bigger car or whatever it might be, because sometimes that's that saying, wherever you go, there you are. It's not going to, if you're trying to do those things to mask because you don't feel you're successful, or you don't feel that you're at the same level as your peers, or whatever it might be. I think sometimes it's good doing some of that work. Something, I don't know if you've seen it, I'll put it in the show notes if I remember. Do you know Dan Gilbert? He's done a brilliant TEDx talk called "The Surprising Science of Happiness."
Yeah. I've read it.
I'm sure you probably have. You've read about a zillion books. But he does, in his studies, he looked at happiness, the happiness scale 1 year on, and he looked at paraplegics and he looked at lottery winners. And 1 year after the lottery win, and 1 year after the patients, suffered the paralysis, they discovered that their relative happiness in terms of the way that he measured them was pretty much the same. Because those that, yeah, back to baseline. Correct. So you think about it, like, obviously for you and I, we'd be like, well, I know which camp I'd rather be in, because one sounds horrendous, but you come to terms with it, you realize that you've got to live and do what you need to do. Whereas lottery winners think it's going to buy them happiness, and they realize actually that doesn't solve the problems that still were there before you won the lottery. Yeah, you can buy trinkets, do things and whatever, but actually the baseline happiness 1 year after both an individual become paralyzed and or neck down and win a lottery is baseline. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. It's a really good talk. I
watched that talk many years ago. I enjoyed it. I think the other thing I wanted to pull up on, because you mentioned the quote twice, and it really resonates with me. Right, wherever you go, there you are. And the reason it resonates with me is because I think, as you know, and the listeners know, after university, back in 1999 it was, I left and I went traveling with the intention of finding myself, whatever, going for 3 months. I ended up going for 25 months in the end. But I remember thinking, because I didn't know what I wanted to be past uni, all my life plan was like, I always thought I was going to be 17 forever. Or then when I got to 17, I realized, okay, there's uni. And my goal was, get a first class degree. And then I didn't have a plan after that. And then my sister, our older sister, had gone traveling. My younger sister had gone traveling because she took a gap year. And so I was the third one to go traveling. And so my idea was go traveling and hopefully find myself and know what I want to do with the rest of my life by the time I get back. And also change aspects of my personality. Like I wanted to be more X or more Y or whatever. And I realized when I was traveling, and it was I don't know whether I was 6 months. I think I was in New Zealand because I remember writing a journal at the time, and I wrote those exact phrases. I think wherever you go, there you are. Is that I was trying to change me by changing the environment. Now, environment does matter, of course it does.
Yeah.
But it was very much that phrase that was in my head. Wherever I go, there I am. Is that I've been trying to escape. I wanted to be more outgoing or more passionate, more gregarious or whatever. I thought by being in another place that would happen. And to some degree it does, right? I remember whenever I come back from Mind Valley, that first few weeks you have that holiday glow and I'm a different kind of person. But the reality is, you have to change, yourself wherever you are. And it's a bit like that book, The Alchemist, right? It's searching for the treasure, right? And hopefully I'm not spoiling it for people, and I can't remember if I'm remembering it right, but actually finds himself back to where he was. It's like it was there all along, right? All the lessons are the same. All these things are the same. But yeah, when you said that, it really brought me back to there because I really realized in that point, and I'm like, and that's also sometimes I reflect. Why do I want to go away? Why do I want to do this thing? Is it because I'm trying to escape who I am and change something? And actually, to some degree, I'm thinking that with Brighton move. I'm going, yeah, London, I'm using the excuse London's too big and too busy. I don't get to connect with people because it takes an hour to get to meet people. Oh, I'm going to go to Brighton where it's only 15 minutes. And yes, environment matters and it's more accessible there. But if I'm not changing if I'm not doing the inner work, right, the outside isn't going to reflect what's going on anyway.
But you do it with awareness of that, which is critical. A lot of people do these things without awareness. I mean, I've said it probably on every episode we've ever done of this show. Those that look outward dream, those look inward awaken. It's so powerful. But I tell you what, something that struck me, and I hadn't considered it before. I'm surprised I hadn't joined up the dots. But going back to the previous conversation about the affirmation piece, for people that have certain disorders, such as a food eating disorder, whatever, actually those individuals, the worst thing you can do is tell them they look great. The worst thing you can do is give them a positive affirmation, because the voice inside, it can be so powerful that everything they hear, they assume is a lie, and it feeds that doubt of saying, "But I'm not, but I'm not, but I'm not." And you almost have to avoid that altogether and work at a totally different kind of plan or solution. And I hadn't considered that earlier when I made the comment, but there's a good example of where actually if you get it wrong and that's more of a genuine mental health condition, but even so, you've got to be very careful about giving positive affirmations. The natural thing a parent, grandparent, loved one would do is go, to someone who said, if I come up to you, Harry, and said, I feel really unattractive, I feel really low, the first thing you'd say as a friend, it's our natural instinct to go, but you're great. We got on really well and you look fine. You've got a beautiful wife, whatever. But if you're feeling that way, doesn't matter what you say. Every time you say something positive, I'm going to be thinking the opposite. And I'm taking that to an extreme, but I hadn't actually made the connection till just then. It was like a eureka. Actually, I don't know where that takes it, but there is a little bit more in it. And obviously, you're not in that situation.
I mean,
I think there's more there. Probably.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me. I think Tony Robbins always used to say this, where often people fight for their limitations a lot of the time.
Yeah.
You say, "Oh, you're actually good at this." No, I like see how it's good. And he said, "Look, guess what? What you fight for, you're going to end up keeping. Right? If you fight for your limitations, you're going to get to keep them." And I think it's interesting, and it's one of those things that I've had to deal with myself, where we all have these limiting self beliefs, and it's often about, for me, I often use the analogy of a belief being like a tabletop being held up by references, like a table with 4 legs or 3 legs or whatever. And those references are things that support that belief. But as soon as you take some of those references away, or you find an alternative reference, like if you say, so one of the beliefs I had before, years ago, being in a relationship, was that if I'm in a relationship, then I'm not going to be as good with my career, maybe, because relationships take up time, right? Dating, chatting, whatever, all this. But then when I did get into a relationship, I'm like, actually, my career was better because they were on the same wavelength, similar values, similar.
You were happier, probably.
I was happier. So all of this was better. So then it shattered that belief. So then when I think to myself, and sometimes still to this day, I think, being in a relationship might be challenging on this because it's going to take up time. And I'm like, hang on a second, is that belief really true? Because I can point to a point in the past when that was completely the opposite. So I have to catch myself and choose these and find these things. Or one of the beliefs that I used to have years and years ago, because all your dads used to have dad bods, right, and stuff. So like my belief growing up for many years was like, when you get older, you get fat.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing is, if you see an older person who's not fat, then that can't be true, because you've created this generalization that people over 50 have pot bellies. Well, if I can find someone who's 55 years old who's not got a pot belly, and even better, got a six pack, that can't be a true belief.
But you're absolutely right. But of course, if you're in the wrong frame of mind, you'll convince yourself and give excuses to that individual. But the exception to the individual is this.
Yeah. They've got money. They've got a trainer. They didn't have the upbringing idea.
Exactly. Well, I thought it was interesting when he talks about we're fighting for limitations. So this isn't a limitation, but this happened at the weekend. I saw weekend before last. I saw two of my really good friends, Sarvin and Paul. They went out to Battersea Power Station and just took kids shopping, did lift 109. And I'm conscious of time, so I won't take it too long. But there's something that I thought was really funny. And Sarvin, I said, I really like your top, it's really nice or whatever. And she said, oh no, I got this in a sale. It was like, I think it was designer. She was, oh no, I got this in a outlet store. It was only. I said to her, it's funny, isn't it? If we ever give a compliment to each other, particularly when it comes to clothes, rather than go, thank you very much, I really like it, we always go, oh, but I got it in the sale. I'm sure people listening to this will say, oh, not this old thing. Oh, this was a hand-me-down, whatever. Anyway, I was making this observation to her and go, it's really funny. You come straight back and go on, it's in the sale. Like, why do humans do this? We all have this instant wish to go, oh, but no, I'm not that good. And it was this and that. Anyway, about 10 minutes passed and she made a comment about something in return. Bemal, I just had this conversation with her, and she was like, "Oh,
yeah," and you do the same thing,
exactly the same thing back. Oh no, I got this given, and she was like, "Yeah, on it." Oh my god, it's so
because we've got these patterns. We do. Yeah, we've got these patterns that we're trying to. I actually remember hearing about that when I did my NLP course like 12, 13 years ago, and it really resonated with me. I was thinking, I think they were talking about whether it's self-worth, whether it's like the tall poppy syndrome, or like in Britain, we don't like to big ourselves up too much and we don't want to make other people feel. And actually, since then, I think I would probably say 90% of the time when someone gives me a compliment like that, I just say thank you.
Yeah.
And I don't give a compliment back, and I don't say, oh, this old thing, I picked it up, whatever. I just say thank you. And it's actually quite interesting, because sometimes I sense almost like not a reaction, but like, when the pattern is interrupted, because normally people are expecting a certain pattern of response, that it's not like they're consciously aware, oh, he didn't say this, or he didn't give me a compliment back, but there's something that's just interrupted their pattern. They don't know what it is, but I can sense that and I can see that, because they're like, but they don't know what it is, but it's just because I've said thank you, as opposed
You're making me laugh. We're going back.
I would actually give a challenge to people listening. So for our listeners to challenge themselves, that when they do get a compliment this week, which hopefully they will at some point, just say thank you.
Yeah, don't return it. Don't excuse it.
Don't return it. Don't excuse it. Just say thank you. And that will feel uncomfortable if you're not used to it.
It's a good challenge.
Sit with the uncomfort.
It's a good challenge.
That's my challenge to you.
Very nice. I'm going to finish. Well, we'll finish on this point, because you just made me laugh, and this brings back a memory that I'd completely forgotten about. There you go, bring it up for my subconscious. It must have been about 15, well, no longer than that, maybe 18 years ago, right at the beginning of recruitment, when I used to be on the sales, calling clients. I had a script and all that kind of stuff back in the day. Don't have it anymore. But I used to call clients so often and so frequently, because you're just doing these calling numbers. But the first thing you say is, hey, my name's Nick, whatever, and how are you? And people would go, oh, I'm fine, how are you? And I'll go, I'm fine. And you get into the conversation, right? I'll never forget it. A guy said, hey, I'm Nick, how are you? And he went, fine. I went, oh, I'm fine, thank you. And he went, I never asked you. I went, oh, no, you didn't. But the pattern was so used to people going, and you just responding. I've never forgotten it, because I remember that feeling. The feeling's the bit you remember. That's the sensation, right? When you tune into our sensations, tune into our inner feelings. The feeling of it was just so uncomfortable, because I'd responded to a question and he never asked me.
Yeah.
I went, I'm fine, thank you.
Well,
I never asked you.
You're on autopilot. That story reminds me of, I don't know if you read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini. I think you have.
No, I haven't. I know of the book, though. I might be on my bookshelf.
Yeah, so there's like 5 or 7 points that he puts in there. But one of the ones that he says to get people, I think it was Cialdini's book, Influence. I'm not sure, but there one of these books. And he was talking about when you want something, if you just use the word because. Right, so, for example, there's a queue at the photocopier at work, right, or the printer machine, and you just say to that person, "Do you mind if I go in front of you and copy this?" Anything you say after the word "because" almost is immaterial, right? Because they're expecting a proper excuse or whatever, they'll probably let you through. Say, "Because I don't want to wait," or "because you know the TV's playing my favorite show." But because you're going on, go, "Oh, because okay, yeah. Can I have your seat because I want to sit down more than you?" Okay, yeah. That might be another challenge if people are brave enough to do that. Just say any excuse. Just do the word "because." I'm sure I think it's in Robert Cialdini's. It might be in someone else's book, but I remember reading it. It's about this because we're on autopilot. It's really interesting.
Well, last autopilot thing, going back to the sales calls, probably the same year. My email address used to be nick.day at my old company name. And obviously everyone would go, how do you say, first thing you say years ago was, how do you spell it? How do you spell it? How do you spell it? And you go into autopilot. And I'd just say, nick.day as in Sunday at da-da-dum. And then one guy just random turned around and went, "What, as in the ice cream?" Oh no. I've picked the only day of the week you can actually spell differently. No, D-A-Y. And I was like, "Oh my God, I've been saying that for years." It's the only day, as far as I'm aware, that literally you can spell differently. So another total autopilot.
Actually, because for someone to say it's like Sunday, to me means the spelling is probably different. Obviously, I know how you spell your name, but when you said the word Sunday,
I don't even know why I picked Sunday. It's just obviously the autopilot day that I picked.
It
and
just
someone went, I like the ice cream. And I went,
I pictured D-A-E
yeah.
at the end. I pictured D-A-E.
That's why I never got all those emails. Apparently, so did lots of other people, and never emailed me back.
But imagine trying to spell my name out over the phone.
True.
I just go into autopilot and I go Kilo Alpha Lima Yankee Mike November India Oscar Sierra. And look,
boom. There's your autopilot.
Now I say K for Kilo, A for Alpha, because I get frustrated, and that's something I've got to work on myself when I'm on calls and I'm like, spell my name again. A lot of the time I just say Cal anyway, K-A-L, and I go, "Is that it?" Yeah, that's it. So,
well, there you go. Here's my positive affirmation for you, Harry, to finish the show. I think you're a very patient person. There you go. So you can take that any way you like it. Look, we've must be patient because you said this might have to be a short episode today, and we've gone on for an hour and 6 minutes. So sorry, listeners. I hope you've enjoyed it. We didn't know what we were going to talk about today. We talked about lofts, nostalgia, hidden things from love letters from yesteryears, and looking at ourselves,
I'm very excited that you're into the Stacey Solomon declutter thing.
So am I.
Definitely, there's an episode that I really recommend watching. Is that the single dad one? Is really that got me in tears.
I'm not sure it's quite the right day for me today. It's looking at single dad.
No, that's true. Actually,
I'll put it on the register.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Dad! If you're watching or listening in the spirit world, and
sure
look forward to being next episode real soon. But thanks, listeners, for joining in. Remember to follow us on YouTube. We've got YouTube short videos as well, where we really condense the episodes into short materials of the key bits. Take a look at that. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter, all the podcasts.
Follow us on there.
Spotify.
Connect with us on social. Remember your challenge for the week. Just say thank you if someone gives you a compliment.
And because if you want to give an excuse. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and because if you want to get ahead in the queue. All right. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.